So in this segment, we're going to be talking about mortgage prisoners, which are people that have been trapped into higher mortgage repayments um, because their mortgages have been sold off by the government to dodgy companies who have managed to basically trick the system so that these people who have these mortgages have to pay far more in interest rates than they should have to. Um, and this is another thing Labour could potentially talk about, but for some reason they're being very quiet on this. So MPs are challenging the government to live up to a promise to help homeowners trapped paying high interest rates because the Treasury sold their mortgages to unregulated firms. So, this is a pretty scary situation, and once we go into the more details of it, then I think it'll be easier to understand why this situation is so bad. So, since they cannot switch to a better deal, an estimated 250,000 homeowners are forced to pay standard variable interest rates. These are well above what competitive mortgages would charge. So, they're being charged far higher when it comes to interest rates, and that's important because typically you pay your mortgage every month, and if the interest rate goes up on it, you're paying more just to pay off the extra interest, not even the mortgage itself. So, but moves to ease their plight has been blocked by MPs. MPs say so. The House of Commons is not doing enough to help these people. The House of Lords has passed an amendment to the Financial Services Act to cap rates for borrowers in that position known as mortgage prisoners, which is a good thing. A cap on a cap on interest rates for borrowers is a good thing because it means that these companies can't charge excessive rates, interest rates, and that once we get into more details, it'll be easier to understand. But because there is a mechanism within the UK that if the lender has a lower interest rate, you can kind of switch to it. But the problem is some of these companies only have one interest rate, so there's no ability to switch. So by implementing a cap, it does help these people. But for some reason, the Tory government don't want to do it. But government whips are instructing Conservative MPs to vote against the amendment in the House of Commons on Monday. Dishi Rishi has promised to look at workable solutions for the homeowners, but the Treasury claims this interest cap would be unfair on other borrowers. But how is a cap unfair on borrowers? It doesn't make sense. Unless this cap just impacts people on single mortgage, single kind of interest rate mortgages. I don't understand. And also the fact that you can implement this interest cap more broadly then. If it's unfair on certain borrowers, you can implement a mortgage cap more broadly so that, lenders can't charge ridiculous interest rates. How about that, Dishy? Idiot. So mortgage trap. So since the financial crash, tougher affordability checks have made it hard to change lenders if your mortgage is large compared to your house price, or if you're close to retirement or have bad credit, which is a bit of a strange thing, but all right. But most mortgage borrowers can still switch to a cheaper mortgage deal on lower interest with their existing lender. However, an existing 250,000 borrowers, such as mother of two Vanessa, which they talk about her story quite a lot, have seen their home loans sold by the Treasury to unregulated firms that do not offer new mortgage deals. So what happened was when certain banks were nationalised in Britain, the mortgages were handed over to the Treasury, and then George Osborne, in a massive rush to privatise everything, decided to sell off these mortgages to some dodgy companies. And because the government did this, these people like Vanessa have been charged excessive mortgage rates. As a result, they are trapped by their mortgages, forced when their initial deal ends onto high standard variable interest rates, where their payments can double or treble what they would have paid in a competitive mortgage. So you've got to think that I don't know how much a typical mortgage is. If you say £300-400, you're talking your mortgage go up by up to £1,000, up to in around £1,000, which you're just paying the interest off. You're not paying the actual mortgage. Vanessa and her husband purchased their Bournemouth home in 2006 with a mortgage with Northern Rock. At the time, it was the market leading loan approved and regulated by the Financial Service Authority. So this was a bank that was very well regulated according to the government. So this was not the fault of the borrowers from borrowing from a dodgy bank or anything like that, an unstable bank. This was a highly regulated lender, which was approved by the Financial Services Authority. So there's no excuse for anyone to say that, it's the borrower's fault. It's simply not the case. However, in 2008, Northern Rock had been nationalised. Their interest rates jumped as they went onto the lender's standard variable rate. But because they had to borrow a large sum compared to the price of their house, their home became known as a high loan to value, and they could not switch lenders. So I think it means that you've borrowed a big loan compared to the value of your house. So say you borrowed, say, £95,000 to a house that's worth only £100,000, something like that. Our mortgage went overnight and literally almost doubled. Our disposable income was zilch, and you've got to think that, by that happening, what it means that you're massively impacting these borrowers, because a mortgage is expensive in itself, but if your month to month spending has gone up just because of this, it means that you're not going to be able to spend as much on goods, services, whatever, as you did before. So that impacts the economy negatively. And also the fact that if these people can't afford the mortgage repayment, they lose their house, they're homeless. She says, when we moved into this house, we had some work done. They took out a small loan to get, stuff done, etc. She's suffered depression over it. She's had 2 or 3 jobs over the period, and her husband was trying to study, so it's difficult. Obviously, it's not their fault that their mortgage rate has increased massively. It's the fault of the lender. So these people are being punished for it. In 2009, Vanessa's mortgage was moved with hundreds of thousands of others to Northern Rock Asset Management, which was then sold on to Virgin Money. The same year, the Treasury, then under Alistair Darling, had a consultation on the mortgage market. It warned that distressed mortgage lenders were selling books of mortgages to unregulated hedge funds and private equity firms. These are vultures who will buy up debt and then try and enact policies so they'll get massive amounts of profit from it. That's what these people are. When you talk about hedge funds and private equity firms, they're vultures. Attracted by the possibility of purchasing an asset at a discount. Maybe if the mortgage was sold on for, say, £100,000, they could buy up the debt. They could buy that mortgage for, say, 65, 70,000, and then they make massive amounts of money from the interest on top of just repaying back the mortgage. So these sorts of mortgages should never have been allowed to be sold by unregulated lenders, hedge funders and private equity firms. They should be sold to banks and building societies, the standard lenders within this country. Non-regulated owners of regulated mortgage contracts may seek to maximise margins by raising interest rates and charges, potentially to levels that are unaffordable to borrowers, because then if you can't afford to pay it, they'll take your house, they'll take your possessions. That's why this story is important. These people have been put in a situation where it's not their fault, it's the government's fault. The government did this, under kind of New Labour, but also under the Tories specifically. They're the ones who did massive damage here. In some cases, the lack of regulation and the possibility of acting in this way to extract profit may be a contributing factor to firms' desire to purchase these mortgages, because they see massive profits in this. Such activity clearly has the possibility to cause severe harm to borrowers, it added. The onward sale of regulated mortgage contracts may seem unfair, as it leads to a reduction in protections to some consumers, both in absolute terms and relative to other borrowers who have purchased similar financial services. So if you are unlucky enough to have a mortgage with a bank or a lender that was then sold on to an unregulated firm, your life could be made hell because of these companies that bought up this debt, and the government allowed this to happen. But under the Tories, it got worse, under the coalition government. So Chancellor George Osborne was keen to reprivatise nationalised assets in 2008 crisis. He didn't have to do this. He did not have to do this. In 2014, the Treasury cast aside these concerns and sold a book of 270,000 Northern Rock mortgages amounting to £3.5 billion of outstanding home loans to US private equity firm Cerberus. Cerberus, the name of the three-headed dog, I think, in Greek mythology. A sprawling guns-to-finance conglomerate owned by Trump-supporting billionaire Steve Feinberg. So most likely a very dodgy dude who's a billionaire, so he has a lot of money, most likely through, I'm going to say maybe slightly immoral activities. It was the biggest privatisation in UK history, and the taxpayer received just £5.5 billion in cash. So the taxpayer almost made a £10 billion loss on assets that the Treasury owned. So why was George Osborne in such a rush to sell these assets? Was it dodgy? Was it that, he wanted to get rid of these because maybe maybe this will help him when it comes to finding a job after he was Exchequer? Or is it because this man genuinely does not care about the mental health of people and decides, I'm going to sell this asset. We're going to, say, the government's done the right thing, and we want to put things back into the private sector and all that rubbish. And then look, the government made an extra 5.5 billion this year, where we can use that to downplay the deficit or something. It's just ridiculous what the government have done here. Because Cerberus did not offer, this is what I was talking about earlier, because Cerberus did not offer new loans, borrowers such as Vanessa, who could not switch lenders, could not access cheaper deals with their existing lender because they only offered one interest rate. As a consequence, they had no choice but to pay the standard variable interest rates, costing substantially more than the market rate, 2 to 3 times higher. But because many mortgage prisoners have now been paying those elevated rates for more than a decade, the additional cost runs into tens of thousands of pounds that these people have had to pay predominantly because of George Osborne. A mortgage prisoner with an average mortgage of £165,000 has overpaid interest between £25,000 and £45,000 over the past decade, according to a report by the Mortgage Prisoners Action Group. That's so much money extra they've had to pay because of the actions of New Labour and predominantly George Osborne and the coalition government. This was not a big story back then. At least I don't think it was. And this is, a huge scandal. This should never have been allowed to happen. In a House of Commons debate on Monday, MPs will press the government to support the reform, which opposes a cap on standard variable interest rates charged by firms in closed books, meaning the firm owns them, does not offer new mortgage deals, such that the interest rates are no more than 2% above the Bank of England's base rate. I think they should be at the average market rate. That's the way they should do it. But it's ridiculous that these groups can charge so much in interest. We're probably talking about 2 to 3 times higher interest rates and fees as well to these quote unquote mortgage prisoners, which never should have been allowed to happen. After the budget, Rishi Rishi promised to find a workable solution. I think an interest cap would be a good idea, but obviously he doesn't want to do that for whatever reason. But in spite of the Chancellor's promise, the Treasury has been lobbying MPs not to support the Lord's Amendment, which shows you what the Conservative Party is all about. So you've got here Seema Malhotra, the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on mortgage prisoners, said it's through the government selling off these mortgages without adequate protection to these mortgage loan sharks that had led to this situation. Absolutely this is the case. In a statement to the BBC, the Treasury said, "We know that being unable to switch your mortgage can be incredibly difficult." No, you don't, bruv. No, you don't, because you don't care about these people. Otherwise, you would have done something about it. You've had around about 8 years. You've had about 11 years to fix the problem with mortgage prisoners, right? Instead, you made the situation worse. Now you're like, we're looking at possible solutions. No, you're not. You're a fraud. But an interest cap would have serious implications and be unfair to other borrowers. How? Unless this cap is way below the market rate, it would not have an impact on other borrowers. Many borrowers could now find it easier to switch to an active lender or continue interest-only payments thanks to a recent rule change by the Financial Conduct Authority. I mean, that's great, interest-only payments, but your debt stays there. You're still going to be paying off this mortgage for a long time, even if you're just paying off the interest. So that doesn't really help that much. It's a short-term fix. Switching to another active lender can help if they're offering you a lower interest rate. That's good stuff. But more has to be done. They have to implement this cap, and they have to look at, regulating these hedge funds and these dodgy companies. You cannot sell what is regulated to unregulated companies because they will make a mockery of it. This is absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, look, in conclusion, the government has to do something about, to help these people, because this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. And look, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.